verses 11 and 12, and it has a subject matter called Advice to Young People. Young people, enjoy your youth. Be happy while you are still young. Do what you want to do and follow your heart's desire, but remember that God is going to judge you for whatever you do. Don't let anything worry you or cause you pain. You aren't going to be young very long. So remember your Creator while you are still young, before those dismal days and years come and you will say, I don't enjoy life. That is when the light of the sun, the moon and the stars will grow dim for you, and the rain clouds will never pass away. Then your arms that have protected you will tremble, and your legs, now strong, will grow weak. Your teeth will be too few to chew your food, and your eyes too dim to see clearly. Your ears will be deaf to the noise of the street. You will barely be able to hear the milk as it grinds, or music as it plays. But even the song of the bird will wake you from sleep. You will be afraid of high places, and walking will be dangerous. Your hair will turn white. You will hardly be able to drag yourself along, and all desire will be gone. We are going to our final resting place, and then there will be mourning in the streets. The silver chain will snap, and the golden lamp will fall and break. The rope at the wall will break, and the water jar will be shattered. Our bodies will return to dust. Our bodies will return to the dust of the earth, and the breath of life will go back to God who gave it to us. Useless, useless, said the philosopher. All is useless.
He's depressed.
Okay, that'll hold. Well, after that, should I say good morning? Okay, just while I change computer, I was going to use another one, but apparently that's not working for me, so I'll just start this one up. Just wanted to recap a little bit from what Murray has presented to us over the series so far. Just wanting to remind you that the book, thank you. The book Ecclesiastes, the name Ecclesiastes, kind of refers to a congregation or an assembly. And the name Kohelet, we don't exactly know who that is, though many people would consider that to be Solomon. The name Kohelet kind of is essentially the teacher or the preacher to that congregation. So in your own version of the Bible, Ecclesiastes, you've probably got preacher or teacher. I'm going to be using the word Kohelet. And it seems like Kohelet is presenting an address to the assembly. And so I called this sermon Kohelet's Last State of the Nation Address. Also just to mention that the images that you see here are generated by AI. The sermon is not, but the initially. Okay, so let's imagine that you are going to Kohelet's Last State of the Nation Address. You're excited to get ready. Kohelet is known to be an amazing leader. And in fact, the kingdom that you are part of is renowned as the world's leading center of culture. You have the most amazing arts and performing arts in the world. You're trading with all parts of the world. You have the best technology for mining precious metals. And not only all of that, Kohelet is created a nation which is mighty militarily, but also at peace with the nations around. It's getting old is part of what you're observing in Kohelet. He's coming to the winter years of his life, I suppose. But still he's known as an amazing, dynamic preacher, teacher, very wise, knows how to make nations great. And you have borne the fruits of that. You've seen the fruits of that over the many years that he has been leading your nation. And so you're excited. You want to know what Kohelet is going to be talking about for this last State of the Nation address. You want to know what vision he's going to paint for your future, for the future of your nation. And so you're in your Sunday best, or perhaps Sabbath best, I'm not sure in those days. You've packed in with the rest of the crowds and you've come to hear this wonderful, dynamic speaker to preach. And he takes his place and a hush falls over the assembled crowd, the assembly. Master of Ceremonies introduces him. This is Kohelet ben David, son of David, king and ruler in Jerusalem. Kohelet begins. Futility of futilities, says the preacher. Futility of futilities, all is futility. The word he's using there, as Murray's already told us, is heper. It's a Hebrew word that kind of means emptiness or vanity, as it's written there. Something that's not lasting, it's temporary, transitory, hard to grasp. Meaningless is another translation that's sometimes used. Meaningless, not just meaningless, but meaningless 5 times. And in Hebrew, when you repeat words, the idea is that you're making something, you're emphasizing it. And when you get to 3, you've really emphasized it. And Kohelet here is emphasizing it to the 5th degree. What on earth have you come to? What is this guy saying? What is this guy going to be trying to say to you? So for the next 90 minutes, I won't take that long, but I'm estimating based on reading through Ecclesiastes. For the next 90 minutes, Kohelet is going to lay out his reasoning for this opening. He's going to give essentially a masterclass in oratory. And he starts out, as I'm sure they taught him in preaching school, giving a personal story. He talks about his own endeavors. He is someone who has attempted to find meaning in every possible way. He's looked to pleasure, he's looked to wealth, he's looked to doing wonderful creative works like building, he's looked to the arts and the theatre and dancing and singing. He's indulged in the epitome of culture, and he's indulged in the depths of sensual pleasures. He says, my heart was pleased because of all my labour. But then in the very next breath, he says that all was futility, striving after the wind. There was no benefit under the sun. Those are 2 consecutive sentences. Of course, it would be easy to stop at this point and say, well, Kohelet's main point in writing Ecclesiastes is to basically say, excess is bad. You know, we can all agree with that, I'm sure. Excess of anything is bad. But I don't think that is what Kohelet is trying to hold in front of us. In fact, he has said already, as we've read before, all my eyes desired, I did not refuse them, I did not restrain my heart from pleasure, my heart was pleased. He's saying that there is actually good in enjoying work. There is enjoyment to be had in things, or relationships, or watching somebody do an amazing performance in the theatre, or somebody jump off a cliff and survive on YouTube, or the Olympics that have just gone and seeing people excel. There is good in all of those things. Kohelet's not denying that. But at the same time, I think we all agree that there can be a yearning for something more. There is an emptiness alongside of the good that can fill our lives. And so Kohelet here is providing us something that is not a simple, easy to answer question. In fact, Kohelet goes on from here. He paints a picture of not just what is good to fill our lives with, but a good way to live. He's talking about wisdom. And he lays out this picture of a well-lived life. For example, he says that wisdom is better than foolishness. Don't make promises. Don't let greed or desire master you, but enjoy the wealth that you have. Don't be lazy, but also don't overwork. Work wholeheartedly and take time to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Take time to enjoy the special people in your life. Take opportunities that arise, but don't be too wicked. And enjoy what is doing good and right, but don't be too righteous. This is Kohelet's wisdom, a balanced, well-lived life. And for people of all ages, of all stages, of all cultures across the world and across the ages, I think many people would have come to the same conclusion that this is a well-lived life. But if this is Kohelet's roadmap that he's painted across the 11 or so chapters of Ecclesiastes, you can imagine him turning it over now and showing us the other side. He says, indeed, if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. Also remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. Everything that is to come will be futility. And so again, it's not a simple sermon on how to live a well-lived life, because on the flip side of that is this darkness, can be this emptiness and despair. Something that Kohelet himself feels very keenly, it seems. So let's stop and just maybe summarize Kohelet's arguments over those 12 chapters. He confronts us with facts that I think we find much easier to ignore. We'd much rather not think about these things. But it is Kohelet's ambition, it's Kohelet's point of this whole argument to make sure that we're looking at this reality clearly. So he says that even if we are to live in the wisest way possible, death overtakes us all. Even if we're to live in the wisest way possible, not only will we die, but the memory of us will eventually pass away. Whatever we've constructed, whatever grand things that we've done, first of all, they won't last. They'll eventually dissipate. We have no control over the future, and our grandest works as a human race are really just tiny, insignificant, infinitesimal perturbations in a cosmic world that will keep on going. I know everything God does will remain forever. There is nothing to add to it. There is nothing to take from it. That's Kohelet's view. That's the picture that he's painting for us. I wanted to just pause here because I think we're going into some fairly melancholy places and give you something that might lighten the mood slightly. An existential comic. They don't know this life of partying is meaningless, and I'm that person often standing in the corner saying everything is meaningless, and he's nodding his head at me. I am that person sometimes saying, what's the point of it all? And the people partying, if they're thinking about this, will say, doesn't he know that this life of introversion and delusional superiority is also meaningless? I wanted to lighten the mood because Kohelet is not actually done with us yet. He has painted a picture so far of the empty things, the emptiness, the vanity, the meaninglessness of life. But then he goes on, and he points out the downright confusion and chaos that exists in our world. Enjoy life, Kohelet. Skill and hard work don't guarantee success. We'll experience that, I'm sure. When we're doing good work and hard work, we can still get bitten by a snake or something bad happen to us. Doesn't seem to make sense. Everything I'm working for, everything I have can get swept away in an instant by a war or a natural disaster. Credit doesn't go to where credit's due. The wrong people and fools get into power. Many would argue we see that right now in this world. And the world around us is full of oppression and injustice. But enjoy life, Kohelet says. Live a good life, a wise life, even though the righteous get what the wicked deserve, and the wicked often get what the righteous deserve. Even though a sinner and sin is much easier than righteousness. Destruction is much easier than building things. Foolishness is much easier and much more potent, he says, than wisdom. And Kohelet's holding this up to us and saying, this is reality. This is what we see around us. Is he being sarcastic? Is this kind of Kohelet saying, well, yeah, you go on and enjoy your tiny little life while everything falls apart around you. Go on. But I don't think Kohelet is being sarcastic. What he's trying to do here is basically hold up to us again this deep, inherent contradiction that we find ourselves in this world as humans. His goal is not to give us any easy solutions to face up to these contradictions. That humans have hearts that desire justice, but out of those same hearts comes lying and deceit and evil. That humans have souls that long for eternal value, but at the same time we're very aware of our transience, our finite lives, and everything being so hard to grasp. We have minds that are rational. We want to see sense and meaning. We want cause and effect. But we're faced with a world that seems random and arbitrary sometimes, many times. We want to apply our strength and our wisdom and have wonderful things happen from that. We want purpose and direction. But we find ourselves in a world where there is a sea of ultimately meaningless endeavors that we can engage with. So that brings us to Ecclesiastes chapter 12. He reaches his conclusion, and we wait with bated breath for Kohelet to turn this dialogue of despair into some glorious and gleaming future hope. I've got a slightly different translation up here. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth. They come and years approach when you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened, and the clouds return after the rain. On the day that the watchmen of the house tremble and strong men are bent over, the grinders stop working because they are few, and those who look through windows grow dim. And the doors of the street are shut, and the sound of the grinding mill is low, and one will arise at the sound of the bird, and all the daughters of song sing softly. Furthermore, people are afraid in a high place, and terrors on the road. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and the caperberry is ineffective. For man goes to his eternal home, while mourners move around the streets. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is broken, and the golden bowl is crushed, the pitcher by the spring is shattered, and the wheel and cistern is crushed, and then dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. There are many interpretations, or people trying to interpret this particular passage. Some people say it is a description of old age and a decaying body. I think that is slightly, it could well be, but it also feels a little bit out of place, the amount of metaphor that you would have to read into this particular passage. Others say that it is a picture or a coded message of a city under siege or at war. And again, that does seem to be a little bit out of place in the context of the body of Ecclesiastes. Some people think it's a prophecy of end times, but again, the wisdom literature is not known for being overtly prophetic, though it could be. But I think whatever it means, the feeling that it gives is very clear. My personal preferred interpretation is that this is kind of reflecting on what he wrote at the beginning of Ecclesiastes, when he was laying out this wonderful picture of the city that he was building, of the choirs that he had assembled, of all the good things that he had built up, and now they're all decaying away. I mentioned that Kohelet was an amazing orator before, and somebody has pointed out that this particular passage is actually all 7 verses, is one long sentence in the Hebrew. And you can imagine the orator trying to get through this in one breath. He would be literally expiring to match the tone of this passage of prose and poetry. Literally in that one breath, he starts with our Creator, and he goes on to describe the deconstruction, the decreation, if you like, of everything that humans hold dear. And then he says, again, Hebel of Hebel, all is Hebel. Futility of futilities, all is futility. Kohelet walks off the stage. He has nothing more to say, no more hope to give. What do we even make of this? Imagine if you were the MC at this event. What would your closing remarks be? But let's first of all recap what Kohelet has told us. Firstly, that there really is nothing that has lasting meaning in this world. He says, whatever we fill our lives with, whether it's power or rest, wealth or poverty, ultimately it is Hebel. It's kind of a meaningless, wearisome, unsatisfying, difficult to put your hands on kind of an effect. He's told us that no matter how well we live, what good choices we make, eventually that will be overcome by death. And that too seems meaningless. And he has told us that we live in a world that seems to be designed to frustrate our earnest desires to find meaning. At least without God. He says, a life under the sun without memory of a creator is meaningless, empty, Hebel. Now, Kohelet was speaking probably around 900, or the writing was possibly around 900 BC. And so he's got 1,000 years or more on many of the philosophies that we know about today. Truly, there's nothing new under the sun. In the West, I'm sure you've heard of nihilism, existentialism, or absurdism. And that is essentially a philosophy that says that there is no ultimate meaning because God is dead. And that actually, the absurd part is that we still want meaning when there is no meaning. That's the philosophy that is made popular by Nietzsche and other Camus, who Murray mentioned the other week. In the East, we have philosophies and religions that also went in the same direction. We actually see evidence that at some point they had memory of a Most High God. But then they ended up moving towards this idea of the void, or emptiness. They want us to embrace non-being, to empty oneself of detachment and desire, and then to accept everything as being transient and without lasting form, essentially Hebel. And so all of humanity, when we have rejected the Creator, has moved in this direction of philosophy, ended up at the same location. Kohelet got into this, I think. So is that the point of Kohelet's speech, that we cannot find meaning without a Creator? No, I don't think so. Because Kohelet recognized the Creator himself. He talked about God. So what was Kohelet getting at? To really answer that question, I think we need to look at some other times and places where people who were leaders in Israel were giving their last speeches as well. And so I wonder if you can come with me, first of all, to listen in on Jeremiah as he's probably sitting amongst the rubble of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the whole kingdom era has come to a close. The kingdom has been carted away into exile in Babylon, into captivity in Babylon. And he's sitting there with the remnant of the kingdom. And he says, and in fact, he hears a word from God to say, go and proclaim in the ears of Jerusalem. This is him giving his address, his authority to give his address. This is what the Lord says. What injustice did your fathers find in me, that they went far from me and walked after emptiness and became empty? And the word that's used there in the Hebrew is hebel. That's at the end of the kingdom era. Let's go back in time to the beginning of the kingdom era. Here's Samuel, having just commissioned Saul as the first king of Israel, and he's giving his final address before he dies. And he said to all Israel, you must not turn aside, for then you would go after useless things. The word there is tohu, which is a synonym, effectively, for hebel. It means useless, worthless, vain, empty, confusion. Then you would go after useless things which cannot benefit or save because they're useless. Only fear the Lord, serve him in truth. And so we have the same themes coming through in this final address. Well, let's go further back in time now to Joshua. He's getting old. This is his final address to the people of Israel after they've conquered the promised land. Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel at Shechem, and they presented themselves before God, and Joshua says, now then, fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity and truth. Do away with the gods which your fathers served beyond the Euphrates River in Egypt. And the implication there, although he doesn't use the word, is that those gods are worthless. They are also empty. They've done nothing for the people. Let's go further back in time again. Meeting Moses now. In his final address, he gathers the people to himself. In fact, he's told to by God, assemble the people so that they may hear and learn the fear of the Lord God. Be careful to follow all the words of this law. And he accuses them of their history, but also warns them of what they will do. You forgot the rock who fathered you. You forgot the God who gave you birth. They have made me jealous with what is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their idols, worthless idols, and the word that's used in Hebrew there is hebel. So now maybe we can start to make sense of what that meaning, the overarching meaning of Ecclesiastes is. What's common about these addresses? They're an address by a leader to an assembly. They're a call to fear the Lord. They are constructed in a way that is not just patting the nation on the back, but actually promoting them, prompting them, encouraging them to turn back to God. In Ecclesiastes, we read, the words of the wise are like goads. They're pointed sticks that drive the sheep in a direction given by one shepherd. There's a tremendous amount of consistency over the 1,000 years and the many speakers that we've just seen. The conclusion is to fear God and keep his commands, because this applies to every person. It would be easy to dismiss this as a cultural statement. It's been kind of ingrained in the language of the Old Testament, fear the Lord your God, all the way through. And we could kind of consider this a bit like Star Wars, may the force be with you, which kind of gets said. Or, if you remember back a few years, be kind in the pandemic. Kind of there's meaning there, but there is much more meaning intended here, I believe. Because this is actually an impassioned plea by God to his people. Why? It's not just fear in the sense that we're concerned that God will judge us. The fear of the Lord that has been talked about here, I believe, comes through this encounter that we can have with an awesome, glorious, overawing inexplicably heavy and weighty God. We can think of examples where people have actually kind of come into the presence of God and seen the glory. Job, in his distraught state, shaking his fist at God, and when he meets God, he ends up saying, "Behold, I am insignificant, I am nothing. What can I say in response to God?" Or when Isaiah gets transported in a vision to the temple in heaven, and he falls on his face and he says, "Woe is me, for I am ruined." He is in abject terror in the presence of the glory of God. When John met Jesus on the island of Patmos in Revelation, he says, "When I saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead man." That was the response, that was the fear. Not fear of fear because God is so great. And when Moses and the people met God on Mount Sinai in the wilderness, the people were so afraid they told Moses, "Speak to us yourself and we will listen, but don't have God speak to us or we will die." That was the fear that was engendered in the people when they came into the presence and the glory of God. And I wanted to look maybe at this word glory, because I think it's quite amazing. In Hebrew again, kabod, it actually means, translated glory, but it comes from a root word that means weighty, abounding, kind of infused with significance. This is the opposite of Hebel. This glory of God is the antonym, in some sense, for the word Hebel. And so what God is calling people to is perhaps through this overarching narrative in Ecclesiastes is actually a warning against idolatry. It's a warning against embracing things that are worthless and valueless. It's a warning against permitting anything in our lives that is not built on a foundation of a relationship with God. In some sense, it's a restating of the greatest commandment. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, no room for anything else, all your soul, all your strength. But it also points forward to a startling hope, because it indicates that God wants to be part of our lives. The God who is out there, who is glorious, wants to be intimately involved in our lives as a rock, a foundation, as he says in the Old Testament. And so, 1,000 or so years later, the creator of the universe, God himself, emptied himself, we're reading Philippians 2. He subjected himself to emptiness and Hebel, to come as Jesus Christ, to die, to be overtaken by the meaninglessness, by the injustice of a Hebel, a perfect man being crucified as a sinner, to give up his life, what did Jesus say, so that we could live, not just live, but have life abundantly, have a full. God himself subjected himself, in some sense, to Hebel, to darkness, to emptiness, so that we could have an experience of the glory and the fullness that we find in God. Maybe before the music team comes back to lead us in our final worship, we might be able to just sit quietly and ask God ourselves, what is his message for us? What is he trying to say to us? Is it a responsive worship that he wants us to call, that he is calling us to now in our hearts? Is it a response of repentance, identifying areas of our lives where we have let emptiness and worthless things get back into our lives? So I invite you now to just sit for a few moments.